Hey, how's it going, everyone? Thank you for joining me on a new episode of the Music Reviewer Podcast. My name's Josh, and thanks for joining me on a new episode of Best and Worst Track of the Week, the week of December 5th. We are now approaching the tail end of the year, and also the Billboard Hot 100 year as well. So, kind of winding down in that sense. And Best and Worst Track of the Week is just a weekly series where I take each new entry into the Billboard Hot 100, give each a letter grade, and pick one that's the worst and pick one that's the best. If you're interested, I got some album reviews. The most recent one being a Worth the Listen episode where I covered something I enjoyed listening to in the past that's more than a month old. In this case, it was all the way back in 2016, White Lungs, Paradise. In my opinion, the overlooked indie punk rock banger album of that year. So if that interests you, go ahead and check that album out and also the review out, or the Worth the Listen out. But also go and look through the episode catalog. I have quite a few album reviews out now. Also, I'm taping this late Thursday night. There will probably be a new album review dropping before that too that I will record probably after this. I'm not sure yet, but that is more than likely going to be the new Bad Bunny third album that he dropped this year, titled El Último Tour del Mundo. Not sure really how that fits into his overall, I guess, discography releases of this year. I don't know if it's just another B-side project, but yeah, I'll be reviewing that if you're interested in some Bad Bunny stuff. But anyways, this week, yeah, like I was saying earlier, the week of December 5th, this year's, even though this has been probably one of the longer years I'm sure most people have dealt with, it's, for most people, it has not been a good year, but it sort of went by. I think once August hit, it seems to have just been a blur since then. Especially with this podcast, it kind of seems like I started it, a couple weeks ago, and it's already been a few months, more than 6 months at this point. So, yeah, but this is a pretty hefty week on this episode in terms of new entries. Some stuff from BTS's latest EP. We have just about every song that we're reviewing here, and also some stuff from Morgan Wallen's upcoming album. I'm not sure why all the singles charted, or not all the singles, but all the singles that have been released thus far have charted. Some big hype around him, I guess. And also quite a bit from Megan Thee Stallion's album that dropped, I guess, already almost 2 weeks ago. Not quite an album bomb, which if it was an album bomb, I probably would have just reviewed the album. Don't think I'm going to review the album. I think I've heard enough, and I don't really think an album review is necessary. But yeah, overall, a lot of movement on the charts too. It was one of those weeks where just about everything that's already been on there has dropped. So it's, in my opinion, that kind of indicates a big shift coming, or we're just in the midst of an overall bigger one, which I guess the charts have been transitioning. We're, I think, a week and a half or 2 weeks away from the new Billboard year, so it makes sense that we're getting a lot of shifts. I think there's some potential wild cards in there. Shawn Mendes is coming up with a new album, I think, right now, since we're already past midnight. So we'll see how that does. And then also Miley's is dropping next week, which I plan on reviewing that as well. But anyways, some highlights before we get started. A new number one goes to Life Goes On by BTS. Didn't expect them to get another number one hit so soon, honestly. Although with the fandom and all that, it kind of makes sense that this stuff charted so well and did so well. Just didn't think it was enough to go up to number one, especially with a different single. If it was Dynamite, I would have, assumed that that was more likely. But that basically means that the reigning number one that's been on there for a few weeks now, Mood by 24K Golden and Ian Dior, has gone down to number two. If the traction stays, I think they'll go back up to number one. I don't see the BTS stuff staying in their current positions. But that really also means that number three by BTS, Dynamite, will probably go down next week too. I don't see it staying in the tens either. So yeah, that overall, a lot of movement in the top 10, but I don't think it's necessarily going to stick. Also, some other highlights. Blinding Lights went down to number 9. And in my opinion, the reason why that's even impressive or interesting is just because basically everything that was on the charts dropped this week and dropped by a lot. But even this, something that's been on the charts for well over a year already, has still been able to hold on to the top 10. That's really impressive. And then also, I kind of predicted last week's number 2, Therefore I Am by Billie Eilish would go down, and it actually did go down quite a bit. It went down to number 11. So, as predicted, a drop off, not quite a huge drop off, but still a drop off. And then also, as we go down, some more highlights. WAP continues to fall down. It's now down to number 23. Kind of exiting that upper quarter. Once it's past that, I think it's pretty much going to free fall out. So yeah, that summer banger has now met its downfall. Be Like That by Kane Brown, Sway Lee, and Khalid, one of our first worst tracks of the week, fell down to number 27 this week. I think this might finally be it for the track, but that I might be speaking too soon. And then also our champion Bang by AJR fell down to number 29 this week. Still, I'm not counting out this song. I've been saying for the past 2 months probably I don't really like this track, but I'm kind of interested. I was kind of interested to see how high it could possibly go. Unless AJR drops an album, I don't think Bang is gonna go up too much higher. Sadly, I think this might be it for Bang. Also, Watermelon Sugar falling down to 36 quite hard. That's been another constant, I guess, impressive chart hit for Harry Styles that's been on for quite some time in that upper quarter, kind of losing its momentum now. And then also, sadly, Pretty Heart by Parker McCollum down to 43 this week as well. I'm kind of hoping we were going to see that get higher, but I don't know if that's going to be the case necessarily, especially with Morgan Wallen dominating these country charts. And also, in general, huge drops across the board for country music. All the country hits that have been kind of projecting upwards are all falling down. Stuff by Russell Dickerson, like I said, Parker McCollum, that Hardy track, Kenny Chesney stuff, and then also some bro country hits that I've been on are just all really tanking right now. And then also Come and Go by The Late Juice WRLD and Marshmello has been on for 20 weeks, but it's finally kind of losing its trajectory upwards, and it's went down to 60. I kind of see that going away too. The only anomaly really is Whoopty by CJ, that really mediocre trap hit, went up this week. It's one of the few tracks that went up to 66. I don't know the appeal of that track. I'm very interested in what's happening. Maybe it's TikTok. I don't know. And then also the once juggernaut hit Adore You by Harry Styles, I believe, over 50 weeks or just 50 weeks on the chart now, has finally dropped out. So rest in peace to Adore You. You were a really good track. I wish I reviewed it. And then also most of the Future and Lil Uzi Vert stuff from last week dropped out. As expected, the one-hit wonder, not really a one-hit wonder, but the Charity song by Phoebe Bridgers and Maggie Rogers dropped out this week, as predicted. And then also the once dominant Mood Swings by Pop Smoke and Lil TJ has dropped out after 20 weeks on the chart. Didn't think that was ever going to die either. And then also, also some quick notes here. What's Your Country Strong by Thomas Rhett out after just 1 week. Now I think it might re-enter again, but I kind of expected more from Thomas Rhett. He kind of has that name power that I in my opinion, is kind of getting up there with some big country artists, but not sure what's going on with that. Heather by Conan Gray is finally out, one of our worst tracks of the week. Can't complain there. And also Take You Out Dancing by Jason Derulo, the Charlie Puth ripoff. Didn't quite blow up as I suspected it may have, but it's after just 3 weeks on the charts, it fell out. So RIP to that, probably. But yeah, that was a hefty highlights reel. But anyways, let's get into it. Our first track this week came in at 99, Cover Me Up by Morgan Wallen. Like I said, I'm kind of suspicious as to why a lot of his tracks are charting so early before the album has come out. A mixed bag in general. This track I actually enjoyed. The only thing about this track, it's a cover. It's a Jason Isbell cover. If you're not familiar with Jason Isbell, I'm not too knowledgeable of him, other that he's kind of this outlaw country juggernaut right now. So he's definitely not of the Nashville royalty. But he is respected in country music for the most part. Wallen covered this track quite nicely. I almost gave this track best track of the week. There's a nice serene introduction in this track with some reverby concert hall vocal effect going on, a rich acoustic guitar and mandolin structuring the track, and the track is paced quite well. It's pretty slow, but I like that it takes its time. And I think this cover is almost about a year old, but it's still going to make the album. I don't know what's going on with Morgan Wallen's management or whoever's helping him put out singles. I don't understand what's going on. The track is nice. It continues to add more and more as it develops, and some great vocal harmonies as the track progresses as well. I gave it a B+. Next track was Bichota by Karol G, coming in at 97. I thought this was a pretty decent track. This is the second Karol G song that I was impressed by. One of the last one got best track of the week, I think. This track kind of starts out with a really dry melodic synth chord progression that structures the track, a nice little guitar melody that colors it in nicely, some typical reggaeton aesthetics, which isn't a surprise for Karol G. She even borrows or alludes to the Hipeta hit, and borrows the melody from there throughout the track. I thought that was interesting. There's also a heavy reverb effect going on her voice that can be a little distracting. But this track overall has this subdued tropical feel to it. It's kind of just low key. It's not bad. My other qualm with it would be is that there's a unnecessary beat switch at the end that's just not very tasteful. It didn't really need to be there. But I gave the track a B overall. Next track was the first one off of the Megan Thee Stallion mini album Bomb, Circles, coming in at 94. I thought this song was interesting. There's a chipmunk-like vocal sample thing that isn't entirely annoying. There's this drum track on here they decided to go with that's a little thin, in my opinion. Not that, I guess, effective overall. Not sure what to really think. Megan raps as usual with great flow and presence. She's a typical badass with her presence on here. It seems like, though, this was meant to be a pretty energetic track, but there's just something a little flat about it. I'm not sure if it falters at the production, but in my opinion, it could have been executed a little bit better overall. I gave it a C+. Next track was another one off Megan's album, this time featuring City Girls and Hot Girl Meg. Coming in at 92, Do It on the Tip. The only thing about this stuff I've been noticing that came off of her album, this stuff awfully feels similar to the Girls in the Hood single, which I guess I wasn't really too impressed by. This might as well have been Girls in the Hood Part 2, but the only difference is City Girls make this track much more captivating as soon as they come in. They just feel more authentic on this kind of track. The hook is okay, but in my opinion, they should have just committed to calling the track Do It on the Dick. But anyways, and then also, I think I listened to the correct version. If I'm correct, Hot Girl Meg sounds pretty good on this track. I'm just not too familiar with her. But if not, my opinions kind of just stay consistent as City Girls kind of save the track, so I gave it a B. Next track was a bit of an odd one, titled Pain Away by Meek Mill featuring Lil Durk, coming in at 86. This track, in my opinion, compositionally just sounds very odd. There's a down-tempo instrumental on this track, some wobbly synth bass lines that I think are a nice touch, some trash can snare hits that are good as well, and then there's some eerie synths faintly mixed in. Even though I like the overall sound of this track, I think this tempo is just way too slow. It feels a little lethargic. It seemed like this track could have had a little bit more potential if they just developed it or just took a different approach. Nice little organ instrumental outro on the track, though. I didn't think this track was bad. I gave it a B. Next track came in at 92, Shots Fired by Megan Thee Stallion. This is an obvious reference to the scandal where she got shot. Best instrumental I've heard off this album thus far. I didn't listen to the whole thing in preparation for Best Orange Track of the Week, but this is one of the better instrumentals out of the batch. A nice sparkly bell embellishment, that's a nice touch. Megan's flow and lines are quite nice as well. She has her typical bad bitch presence, and she sounds somewhat angsty here. I think it's good. She obviously, this is a fuck you to Tory Lanez. There's a bass line in here that kind of speaks quite well when it comes through. But overall, I think it's just pretty minimalist on the instrumental. Nothing too crazy, but it's at least solid. I give it a B. The next track is the first of the batch from BTS, titled Disease, at 72. Thought this track was okay. For some reason, BTS's music, especially their instrumentals, really give me a hint of nostalgia a lot of times. I'm not sure if that's just a K-pop thing where they're borrowing a lot from past American pop and incorporating it into their own version. But this one weirdly gives me like a Gorillaz vibe on the track with some of the quirks, especially in the verses. It's kind of hard to explain, but I could definitely hear something I've heard, maybe along the lines of like a Dirty Harry, a slight influence of that kind of thing. The track has some nice flavor with the record scratches thrown in as well. I like that sort of quirk. The second verse on here is structured around like a rap verse. I'm not sure by who. But I like the presence and the flow on these rap verses, and the rapping definitely makes the track a lot more interesting. It grooves overall. It's groovy. The production for some reason just gives me aesthetics of like a mid 2000s sort of sound for some reason. It's nice to hear. It takes me back. And then also there's like this key change towards the end. I believe that ends with like this grandiose ending, or at least it tries to go for that. And there's a nice punchy bass line that comes through at the end. I thought overall maybe the grandiose sort of thing at the end kind of ruined the song for me, but overall I thought it was good. I give it a B-. Next one was off Megan Thee Stallion's album featuring DaBaby, Cry Baby. I wanted to like this song a lot more, but just the baby ad-libs and references were just super dumb in my opinion. DaBaby fits on this track quite well. He raps with great presence, typical DaBaby flow, nothing too crazy. There's a nice pre-chorus build up here that creates a lot of tension that leads to like the drop or the hook. Just the baby noises on this track are just bad and annoying. And it's a sex song. Megan really doesn't hold back on that in terms of like her lyrical content. In my opinion, it's just not her best performance. It's really trying to play to that sex song gimmick that I think she was trying to go for like another WAP maybe. It's pretty standard for Megan, but I think she could have done better. I gave it a C. Next one came off of the BTS EP 70. Coming in at 70 with Telepathy. Some interesting vocal timbre on their voices here. A little synthetic sounding. Definitely some auto-tune stuff going on. There's an overall nice groove. I like the prominence of the bass line on this track. The drum track, in my opinion, though, this and some other tracks from BTS, the drum track is just mixed way too high. It's really dominating, and it's abrasive. There's some interesting auxiliary percussion going on here that sounds like something like a metal can is being hit. The rap verse, although isn't as exciting as some of the previous stuff I covered from the BTS batch. It just kind of feels like a lighthearted track. Not a fan of how the vocal runs play out towards the end of the track. I thought they were a little cheesy. If this track just wasn't as effective as the other one, Disease. But in my opinion, it's roughly about the same grade, so I give it a B-. Next track was off of the BTS EP, coming in at 69, Fly to the Room. Interesting introduction here. Again, I think, this track had, it suffered from the drum track being way too dominating and abrasive. I like the vocals here. They're a little bit more sensitive. I like the change of pace in that sense. The track feels like it has an overall more space and more room for things to be paced out better. I'm not sure if I like the overall sanitary nature of the song, though. The instrumental just feels a little formulaic, copy and paste from like an instrumental that could have just gone on like some other adult alternative song in the late 2000s, a la Sarah Bareilles type thing. That kind of just ruined the song for me. And then also the ending tries to be grandiose. That's something I've noticed with BTS. They go for these really grandiose endings. I'm not sure if they nail it all the time, though. So I give it a C. Next track was also really nice. I'm happy it was on here. Miley Cyrus featuring Dua Lipa. Coming in at 54 with Prisoner. We'll do a review of Miley's album. This track almost got best track of the week. I like the synth pop nature to it with the 80s flair on this track. Some pretty synth melodies all throughout. And Miley and Dua Lipa sound great. Their chemistry is nice. The beat drop into the chorus is a nice arrival. It bops. And then the main groove structured around the bass groove on this track is really good as well. It gives the track tons of energy. With the funky syncopated bass line, it fits into the track quite well. The lyrical stuff is pretty oversimplified, but I think it still fits the track quite well. I give it a B+. Next track was off Morgan Wallen's batch of singles, Still Going Down at 46. To be honest, I like Morgan Wallen's performance here. It's a lot better than some of the other tracks this week, despite still having this pop flair to it that I didn't really dig on some of the other tracks we reviewed this week. There's a sincerity to this that kind of feels candid a bit. There's an acoustic guitar that kind of just lines everything up on this track that feels a nice touch. I can see how this resembles maybe like a Jason Aldean formula with like the pop flair and the percussive elements and the songwriting. I think this might be the way Wallen is being pushed to go from like his label and management. But overall, the performance and the execution I dig. He's able to pull this off. This sort of Jason Aldean slight influence. I gave this track a B. Next track was also from Morgan Wallen at 25, Somebody's Problem. Wasn't too crazy about this one. There's some organic instrumentation on the track that I thought was okay. It's definitely of the romantic love song category, but I'm not really sure if this is really Wallen's forte, especially with how he presents his vocals. There's some inflections that he throws in that try to portray emotion, but I don't think they quite hit the mark. I don't think they're quite fitting for this kind of track. Also, lack of low end. I wasn't a fan of that. So we just have like this light organic instrumentation with like acoustic guitar and, some percussion, but I don't really hear any bass. It's supposed to be kind of like this cute track to pull on like some emotional strings, but I don't think I'm quite sold on it. I give it a C+. Kind of winding down to the latter part of the new entries, coming in at 13, Blue and Gray by BTS. I dig the serene and sensitive opening on here. The vocals sound pretty nice when they're exposed and sang with emotion. The spoken word rap thing when it comes in, though, is really cheesy. I thought that was, something that the track could have done without. The percussive elements are quite nice, though, not as overbearing as some of the other BTS tracks. Some lovely string instrumentation thrown in as well. The track aims at these arrivals where the vocal harmonies happen that are quite pretty as well. So I think, the way the track's structured when that happens, you get some nice moments. And then also, there's just some parts, though, when a new vocalist is introduced, it can just be really corny. Like it's like you're watching a pageant and they're making a really grandiose introduction. It's okay, here we have blah 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 this person, and then we have that person. It just seems like they're just saying you go, you go, you go, and that's kind of what this kind of track is. And it's not bad though. I give it a B. Next one is off of the Megan Stallion album, Body, coming in at 12. I think this is definitely the big takeaway from this album overall. This is by far one of the hookier tracks that I think is going viral-ish right now. Could do without the moaning sample. It's a bit too overutilized. As usual, Megan raps with great flow and presence on here. For some reason, it just seems a little similar to Girls from the Hood, or that other track she has, and it seems like I would like to see Megan go in another direction, because the songwriting, the aesthetics of this, even Megan's performance here, sound regurgitated. It's not bad. I just heard her do this before, but I think overall the hook saves this track. I gave it a C. Next one was an interesting one by Shawn Mendes and Justin Bieber, coming in at 8, titled Monster, is kind of foreshadowing the album for Mendes coming out. It's a mid-tempo track, some crackle effect used to give it like a vintage feel. Has a bit of a soul influence with some down-tempo R&B aesthetics. They surprisingly work well together. Just in my opinion is the weaker link here, though. Shawn just fits in with the whole aesthetic better. You can definitely tell this is his song. Justin by no means is bad, though. I like this a lot better than the last Mendes single as well. It's a pretty melodramatic track. But I like as the track develops, we get some more texture, like the faint brass instrumentation, and it kind of just develops nicely. I gave this track a B. Next track is our last one before we get into worst and best, or best and worst. Life Goes On by BTS. This one was kind of just one of the more forgettable ones, but I didn't think it was terrible. Not a fan of the synthetic sounding chord progression right in the introduction. Has this poppy, pop R&B influence to it. Sounds very 2000s. The drum track sounds a tad thin, so I know I was complaining about it being overbearing, but this is kind of just the opposite. Another awkward entrance by a lot of the band's members, especially when whoever comes in the second verse. The payoff in the chorus honestly isn't that impactful either, so if the track was working towards providing a good chorus for the listener, it's pretty unimpactful. It's a pretty sounding track, though. It's kind of what it has going for it. I mean, it's kind of just looking at a nice little painting, I guess, that you buy for, I don't know, at Hobby Lobby for $20. I gave it a B minus. But now we're at that part of the show where I do best and worst track. Kind of had to think on the best track, but I think I made a good choice. But we'll start at the worst, so we leave on a positive note. I kind of alluded to the worst track. It's Living the Dream by Morgan Wallen. I just don't know what's going on here. I'm surprised this is going to make his album, if it does. First of all, I don't like how his voice is mixed in this at all. It sounds slightly flat and weak. Also, a lot of the lyrics sound slurred and undistinct, so Just the diction isn't very pronounced. Definitely has some pop flair. Does not feel like a country song, which I'm kind of surprised Wallen made a track like this. It definitely does not fit him. The drum track feels very rigid and mechanical. The guitar instrumentation just sounds small and unimpactful. The track also fits in terms of lyrical content. This stereotypical "I'm famous now, it's not easy" sort of thing that we've seen a million times, and it just sounds unauthentic to Wallen. So I'd say rather than this being a terrible song, I think this is just a lack of self-awareness, or it's something that I don't think is true to him. So that's why I got worst track of the week. Best track of the week, though, I don't know why this stuck with me. It was "Stay" by BTS. This has the reason why I thought this song stuck out in a better way for BTS is because of the EDM influence and I guess production and the execution of how they were able to pull this off. It sounds legit. It sounds almost like Porter Robinson like. There's a really pretty ending on this track that kind of just doesn't. If you were just listening to that, you probably wouldn't think you're listening to a BTS track. And I think that's kind of why I give kudos to the group overall, because they're able to play around with so many different genres and styles. To me, in my opinion, they're at their best when you don't expect them to sound the way they do on some of their tracks. Meaning, I guess, BTS sound really great when you don't really realize you're listening to BTS. I like in terms of the song, I like the playful synth chord progression that later is coated by a rich sounding acoustic guitar. There's a nice dancey feel to this track as it develops and arrives. The build-up on this is just great. Like, it stretches out for a really long time to build you up to that EDM drop, and it starts I think maybe 45 seconds to a minute before we get there. It's executed quite well, and once we finally get to that drop, it's an excellent moment in the track, and you get that, I think, 2 or 3 times in the track, that anticipation and tension, and I like the way this track was set up for them, especially in terms of how the vocal harmonies build up on top of each other as the song progresses. It turns out quite nice when they do that on many points of the track. Also, these accompanying bright synth melodies and textures really add on to the excitement of this track overall. It's just a really nice executed EDM track. I wish BTS would go in this direction, and they are a lot more interesting in this context, in my opinion. But that was best track of the week. But yeah, if you stuck with me through this whole entire lengthy episode, I appreciate it. My name's Josh. I'll be reviewing some more music soon. If you're streaming on your preferred service, if you're able to subscribe, if you're digging what you're listening to, please do. If you're on YouTube, also like and subscribe or comment, good or bad, whatever feedback you have. Appreciate you guys for listening and any feedback as well. But take care of yourselves. I'll see y'all later.